It's commonly said that Old English and Frisian are mutually intelligible, which of course means that if two native speakers encountered each other in the wild, even though they're not speaking the same language, they might be able to understand what the other person is saying. Now, there have been a couple attempts on YouTube in various places to attempt to demonstrate this. I think we both feel that those attempts have been somewhat unsatisfactory, but today we have the opportunity to give it our own shot. Do you have any thoughts on this, on the intelligibility of Frisian and Old English?
I mean, do I? I think it's one of the fascinating things, this idea that you can go over 1,000 years into the past and have a language like Old English that may still be understood by this weird corner of the North Sea world, which is Frisia. And I think in some ways, yes, there is some truth to this, but I think it's often very much oversimplified. And I think we'll probably demonstrate that today, that of course a lot of things have changed. So modern English, modern West Frisian, in my case, there are more Frisian languages. They've both gone on their own paths, which has been very interesting. But nevertheless, despite those 1,000 years, 1,000+ years of changes, there are some things which are remarkably still very similar that you can see that there is this great connection between the two languages. So, yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and I'm excited to get into it.
Okay, so what's going to happen now is we're going to start talking. I'll be speaking in Old English, Hilbert will be speaking in Frisian, and we're going to just see how far we can go. I'm not really sure how long this conversation will last. We might find that it's too difficult and give up. But then after that, we're going to talk about what just happened, what we can learn from the connections between the two languages, what is interesting there. And then we're just going to talk about the state of Frisian and the modern Frisian language and the preservation attempts and stuff like that. So enjoy. Hilbert, Leof, wees hal.
Wat ik in de hal ha, dat ga ik
Hal.
net verstaan.
Oef. Uh, ich hierde, dat du zeide mij voorstanden, wenungen, dat du voorstandest, of de voorstenst, dat de ich nu zeide, is dat zo?
Ja, ik heb het net verstaan, was do zeidest.
Du hast Nacht, du hast Nacht verstanden? Is dat
Ja,
dat du zeidest?
ik heb het net verstaan. Zeg maar, do zeidest wat van hal? Wijs in een hal?
Jeze, each side a weeshal. Weeshal on thati taknath. Bel
Weeshal.
jesund, bel hal. Bel thu, that is thu, bel thu hal. Wees thu hal.
Beeuw. Ja, wat zou dat wijzen? Beeuw.
Bel thu hal, wees thu hal. See thu hal. Wenunga, see thu hal.
Zie hoe
Dat
hal.
is
Is het
hiti taknath,
wees?
each spec.
Ja? Wees. Is dat wijzen? Wijzen? Wijzen.
Each weneth that thu
Wolwijzen.
each weneth that thu nu saye was akich not to sole each sedje that each wishe fast that thu hal see that hal that he talknath each hal each gold each hal each my well um
Dat zeg maar, dat is nou zoen best. Dat is nou net ziek best. Als ik
jesund
ziek ben, zoen. Ja, zoen. Dus
jesund soldier
dat wil zeggen dat ik zoen wijze mij.
Jeze.
Ken
Each
dat?
side that each wille that thu ert jesund that thu ert hal. Jeze.
Dat wil dat ik zoen ben.
Jeze.
Ja,
Ak
oké.
soldier.
Mooi. Aha. Dus zeg maar, wijs hal, dat is, goeie, ik hoop je dat je zoen best.
Jeze. Each hopie that thu jesund ert. Jeze.
Ja,
Of
dus
jeze.
dat is een groetnis. Een groetnis van hoi, goeie, hoe gaat het met je? Een groetnis.
Jeze.
Een groetnis.
Greeting. On English
Ja.
greeting. On thu
Ja,
wenonge
oké.
each wene that thu saye greatness of
Eh,
thu leech.
je wees, een groetnis.
Easy, easy. Sweet
Oké,
gold.
no verstaan ik het. No verstaan ik het. Ja,
Und
best.
nu each understande. Easy, sweet gold. Und Leuf, who art thou today?
Hoe art thou? Ja, ik neem aan, ik denk dat dat betekent, waar bist du?
Easy, easy. Zeg je het echt?
Ja, waar bist du? Mijn naam is Hilbert. Waar bist du?
Nee, ze Leuf, nee, ze.
Nee? Oh,
Nee, na waar
verkeerd.
heel van.
Nee. Oké.
Thu nu askodest me. What art thu? Und so dat je what art thu, also, we mogen ook zeggen, what did it that? That je tak na that each not what thu art. Ak each
Ja.
askode who art thu? Who art thu? That is,
Ja.
who maakt thu? Uh, who?
Maar harkje. Oké, harkje. In het Fries hebben we waar bist du? Nummer 1. En dan zou ik zeggen, Hilbert. Waar bist du? Hilbert. Maar
Mm,
twa, wat bist du? En ik zou zeggen, ik ben een man.
mm.
Versteer je dat?
Jete, each verstande, understande, så dat je,
Ja.
men zei dan zo dat je each voorstande ook last. Niet dat zo dat je swede je hame, swede je woonlich. Ook thu askodest, if each habe da ilgan thing. Und each said that thonne thu aske hwa er thu that nis English. Thu ne macht sajan hwa er thu. Ak thu macht sajan what er thu und each said to tham each grai homa. Min noma is grai homa. Jif thu
Ja.
askodest. Jif thu askode what er thu each said min noma is grai homa. Jif thu askodest who er thu each said to tham each gold. Each my well. Dat je dacht dat each
Sa.
haal of je zond.
Ja. Ja, nou komt de aap uit de mouwen, om het zo maar te zeggen. Dan zou ik zeggen, hoe, Loïc, hoe gaat het met die? En zou ik zeggen, het gaat, met mij gaat het goed.
Hmm.
Hoe, hoe is het? Hoe is het? Hoe is het? Goed. Of min.
Ah, easy, easy.
Is dat
Und
het correcte antwoord van die vraag? Het antwoord? Het antwoord?
ich will ask you on you talk not that that who suicide is who gate it. You
Hoe
talk not
gaat,
that
ja.
who gath it. That is each ga no each elder
Ja.
each ga. That is through asko that's who gath it.
Je wees. Dus gaan. Hè, ganen. Ja, dat dorst maar de voeten. Hè, dat is gaan. Ik
Easy,
begreep
easy.
het. Ik begreep het. Maar als ik
Gone.
vraag je aan die, hoe gaat het met die? Dan vraag ik net, waar gist du heen? Nee, maar hoe gaat het met die? Hoe feels du die? Feels du goed? Feels du
Ah,
min? Hè, hoe gaat het?
easy, easy. Easy. And if through asko that's who there gas also gas through thunder soldier of each understand that. Ak if through asko that's who gassed through Sånne wenunge each when it that you talk near who is thin färreld. That is thin färreld, that is each ga of of anrestoe to anrestoe and that is mean färreld. This is mean färreld. Betwelks thumb bomb mean färreld. And if du askodest who gas du thonne that you talk nach to me who is din färreld. If du askodest Hoe gath hit iets not what dat je tak niet. Iets
Nee,
nee
oké.
understanden dat.
Dat is heel oors, hè? In het Fries en het Oud-Engels. Die
Ah.
woorden binnen oors.
Niet iets oud Engels, zo dat je, het is Engels. Iets spreken nu aan Engels. Iets not what je tak niet oud Engels.
Dus,
Iets zend het
oké.
dat on way.
Ja, oké. Ik mag het dus geen Oud-Engels nemen. Voor die is het gewoon Engels.
Easy, easy. On
Ja.
each subject to thumb, onward English for thumb, that is that the way sprekat onwardum tirum, of onwardum timum, of onwarde, easy, easy. Each side richt. On that je tak not nu, on thissere tide. Ak, so that je English is English. On
Oké.
on that side on that he spraken on English on each stage nu that each spreken on English. On each stage that butere bread on graine cheese is gold English on gold Friesisch. Akka,
Nou,
so that je on
ja.
English that heeft niet
Dat weer wel
zweet
makkelijk
on.
te verstaan, ja. Ja, boterbrei en green cheese is goed Engels en goed Fries. Dus, oké. En
Easy.
hardstove van cheese.
Oof. What side is still live?
Ja, hardstove van cheese.
Iets nee understanden dat er staan dat voor man woord.
Ja, sis
Oké.
maar. Ik sis. Ik, tien mijn vriendinnen.
Mm.
Mijn vriendinnen. Ehm, of mijn leven. Ik sis, tien mijn leven. Ik houd van die.
Oh. Dat is man de thu luvast?
Ja, ja,
Het is iets
leven, hè?
luviëfe? Iets
Ja,
luviëfe?
maar ja, ik houd in het Fries, ik houd van die. Dus ik
La leuf.
en
Dat is wonderlijk.
houden is, hè, dit is een pennen. Ik
Mm.
houd de pen, houd ik vast. Ik houd het vast. Maar het betekent ik houd van, betekent ik ha het leef. Dus als ik zeg, ik houd van cheese, dan is cheese, ja, goed, lekker. Ik houd van cheese.
Mm.
Begrijpst
Dat
du?
is wie de cellich on wunderlich dat du mij spraakst. Dat du mij spreekst. Ich weet dat ich understande. Dat ich understande. Dat je tak na dat du luvast I wat. Und du ask dat nu, jif ich luvie cheese?
Ja, hardstyle, correct. Hardstyle van cheese.
Leo, tu ascoltas je fiets Luvia cheese?
Ja, maar
Cheese,
als je...
nis cheese mon, nis cheese weef. Who mij iets cheese Luvia? Ak iets zeg te, dat het liek af mij.
Ja, oké,
It is
oké.
good to eten, ne?
Ja, dat is zo, hè. Do hardst van cheese op een oren wijze als van een vrouw. Of van een wief.
Jeze, weef. On thu
Ja,
side is
wief.
fra,
Vrouw.
fra. Dat is
Vrouw.
mijn slawoord, mijn druchten, fra.
Nee, in dit geval net. Een vrouw, je hebt precies maar mannelijke en er binnen vrouwen. Daar hebben we het over. Dat binnen beide, binnen dat meisken. Meisken?
Meis, la, Leo. Wat zei
Meisken.
je nu?
Ja, daar binnen wij together, binnen wij meisken.
We
Ja,
together. Together sind this word. We sind
meisken.
so that you
Ja.
wear us, of the chairlas, of the kuman, of the so that you men.
Ja, mannelijke. Mannelijke. Wij binnen beide,
Mm.
binnen wij mannelijke. Sure, het is exa een ko en een skiep. Versteer je dat? Een ko. En een skip. Bæ.
Ah, shape. Shape. Gaat on
Skip.
shape.
Ja,
Easy.
nee,
Iets understonden.
net een guide. Een guide, maar er is ook een co. Dat, een
What?
co, of ik een, ik ken ook zeggen een horse.
Horse. So dat je horse iets understonden. Horse, we hebben het
Ja,
henjeth. Horse. Um,
ja, een
um,
hingst. Een hingst.
easy, easy, easy.
Dat is
On
een
elch.
horse, maar een mannelijk horse. Hè? Een mannelijk hingst, dat je een hingst.
Ah, yo. Easy, easy. Iets
Ja,
understonden.
een
Ja.
hingst. Maar als je, ik wil zeggen, een ko en een skip en een horse of een hin, dit binnen alle jaar besten.
Mm.
Besten.
Niet te nu. We zeggen het daar niet te nu. Hij zijn doen niet te nu. Hij zijn doen deur.
Dat
Of
heb
het
ik net
lise.
verstaan.
Nee, net het deur. Is het deur. Hij zijn doen deur. Wheeldeor. Wheeldeor, way
Nee,
nunca tu understands. Wheeldeor. Dat is
ja, wild.
bar. Ak chicken of a koe.
Een
Hij zijn
ko.
niet te nu.
Ja, ja, een ko
En
in die.
die fiets wel de Bijan Broen koe van iets zeggen dat iets wil het doen.
Oké, ja, een bruine ko. Dit binnen besten. Besten, wilde
Mm,
besten, like als wolven of ravens, of
easy.
ook nog
Iets.
beren. Dat binnen wilde
This
besten.
this sellich word they thu seist best is that of Laden, each wene that komt of tham Ladene of tham Ladenum jureorde that je takt of bestia.
Dat zoek ik denk het wel. Ik denk het
Mhm.
wel. Ja, ja.
Is each habit that you say on Aldenborgum bestia.
Ja, in oude boeken hast het zoen. In
Ah,
oude
easy,
boeken.
easy.
Ja,
Mhm.
ja, oké. Maar wij, dat binnen sis maar, dat ben besten en wij ben meesken.
That word each nee understande na
Nee,
waar dan.
heel
Each
dat
way
waar.
that it takni cherlas of the weras. Mak each not so.
Ja, tjerlaas. Wat is dat?
Ways in cherlas. So the
Wij
genesin
beide?
we weave. Um, weave on cher. Of the gumma, of the where. Weave of the quaine of the maith. So that je meiden.
Meiden. Ja.
Weave. Du
Ja,
understandst?
weef.
Weave. Mhm.
Ja, dat
Weave, je
binnen
sagt das
dit
Quene on meiden on Thrillige.
fralje of famkes of frommeskes.
Ah. Ak wezen don Cherlas on
Oké,
Weras
dus
on Guman.
soort ja, mannelijke of kerels. Wij binnen kerels.
Okay, maybe we're at the limits of where we can go. What is that
Yeah,
last word that you just said?
yeah. So this is the fun thing, right? Where that a lot of the time, Frisian and English, we have the same palatalization, but in the case of like a chill, in Frisian, it's sort of it's reversed. So kerel is a word for like a geezer, a bloke,
Oh,
and
that is
then
the cognate.
yeah, yeah, that is the cognate.
Wow.
But yeah, I was trying to think the whole time, like I can't use too much of my kind of etymological knowledge. So even though, right, actually quite a few Dutch words link up really nicely. So in Dutch, the word for animal is still dier, right? So like
Hmm.
deor. And you said like meiden.
Easy meiden. Hmm.
Yeah, well, that's still very colloquial Dutch for girls. But in Frisian, those words aren't there. So we say famke
Interesting.
for a girl, which actually is from French, right? Because it's from like femme, les femmes, and then
Hmm.
we get the diminutive femme, famke. Um,
Hmm.
I found it very interesting that the word meisken was such a difficult one.
Yeah. How do you spell that?
It's Minskeen.
I can't think of a single cognate in Old English or modern English with that word.
It's cognate with man, so it's our word for people.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Mace, and this is fun because then obviously we went over the word like Frau,
Hmm.
which is that word for woman. Um, but there's the word Frau and the word Meisк have been put together, and it's become in modern Frisian Frommas because it's been like swooped together. But it's the same construction whereby you get woman, which was initially weave man, right? It's the
Hmm.
same kind of idea, but then using the word Frau and the word Meisк instead of weave and Meisк.
Yeah, fascinating. I think I've heard the construction that I think you were using. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's haldfon. Um,
Mm.
to is that how you say it? Haldfon?
Yeah, in Frisian it's hard fun. Yeah,
Hardfon. Okay. And that means to love something.
exactly. Yeah.
Can it mean a sort of more casual, like to enjoy, like cheese, to just like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I like cheese. Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, so that you picked up on that, right? When I kind of explained it with the analogy of like if I have a girlfriend, a vriendinne,
Hmm.
then I would say that I love her, and that you sort of were like, "Whoa, do you like cheese that much?" But yeah, it's become a lot more casual in Frisian, and it's
Hmm.
similar in Dutch again. Houden van in Dutch. I think in German, do they have a similar construction? I don't know.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I've never heard it if it exists, but
Yeah.
I've only been speaking German for like a couple years now, so I'm not a native speaker by any means.
Yeah, I reckon that's probably because Dutch has had a lot of influence on Frisian, so there's quite a few
Mhm.
constructions that have gone both ways, but also a lot that haven't, right? As we saw just now.
Yeah, the word Luvian, I'm not sure that a native speaker actually would have been so confused to hear you describing what he would have associated with Luvian to talk about like a material object. So that might have been anachronistic, my kind of surprise at that.
Mm.
But I've never seen the word used apart from relationships either between a man and a woman or between a human and God. So yeah, I think it was a bit almost as reverent as it is nowadays, although certainly colloquially in modern English you say like, oh, I love to go to the movies or something like that. But
Yeah,
even that it has a very strong meaning compared to like I enjoy or I like, you know. So
yeah, exactly. I think. Yeah, that's one of those words which has become a lot more casual. And it's interesting that that love word, because it's still there in Frisian, right? Leif is a word, and you can call your sweetheart Lever. That's there, but we just don't use that as a verb anymore. Like that's gone. So there's no ik lever van isn't really something. I believe in Dutch, which is under a lot of influence from English. There's kind of new neo-Dutch street language, which is ik loef. So that people saying like ik loef je, which then is just the borrowing of English love, right? But it's then phonetically been adapted to sound more Dutch. So it's fun because obviously that at one point in the language that probably was there, then it's gone, and then now it seems to have
and
been
now it's going back,
reintroduced by
yeah.
English. So yeah,
I think another really interesting one is the English word is forståndan. In modern English, that would be verstand, and that corresponds with I know German verstehen, and then you were using a word that sounds really similar to that. Could you remind me what that is?
yeah, it's verstaan in
Oh,
Frisian.
it's the same.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty much the
Wonderful.
same. Yeah, yeah. So that's quite an easy one to get. It's interesting that in modern English it's become understand rather than
Yeah.
forestand, right?
That happens in the Old English period.
Right.
You don't immediately see it, and I think forståndan only means to understand in one instance, which I guess shows that it's losing. I'm sure the word in Proto-Germanic carried a certain meaning of being able to understand, and just kind of began to lose steam. And then, really, for most of the Old English period, the way to say I understand was really more like ichiseo, I see, you know, which is obviously still valent in modern English, but the word underståndan really begins to pick up steam by the end of the Old English period. Probably more in Mercian than West Saxon, which is why we don't see it so much in our texts. And then it suddenly becomes super popular in Middle English. But yeah, that's an interesting one because you know when you learn other languages in the Germanic family tree, Verstehen is one of the first things that you encounter, and it's cool to know that we once had that in Old English.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It is fun how these things go that you sort of see some languages choose one variant or
Hmm.
form, and then the others go a different way. It's the same with words for reading and writing. I'm always very surprised that English, went down these routes. These, I mean, both read and write, unless I'm mistaken, are Germanic in origin, whereas Frisian, Dutch, the Scandinavian languages, German, they've all gone with these Latin loans, right? So like in Frisian, it would be skriwe and lezen from like similar roots to well, I guess scribe in English, schrijven, lezen in Dutch,
Yeah.
skrive, lezen, lezen in Norwegian. So
I have to attribute that to the fact that English developed a literary culture so much earlier than any other Germanic language really that I can think of. We're already seeing literate Englishmen in the sixth century, which is so early. They weren't writing in English yet, but certainly once you write in Latin, you have to find a way to talk about writing in Latin to people who don't know Latin. You
right.
have to tell like the servant like, go away, I'm writing right now. Well, they have no idea. If you said like I'm scribing right now, they would have no idea what you're talking about. They wouldn't understand that word. So you would have to use something that is understandable to everyone.
Yeah.
Which
We,
makes a lot of sense. They would write runes. I think that's probably where the word originally gets its meaning from. But
yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah, it's interesting. It's lucky. It's cool.
It's funny though because the Anglo-Saxons played a very central role in the initial conversion of the Frisians. And also in Scandinavia, there's a lot of Anglo-Saxon missionaries that went over there, and they've traced some of these sort of through these. Oftentimes, they're initially Latin words that have then got an Old English form and then have gone into Old Norse. They've traced a lot of these, and there's a couple words in Old Frisian that have come from Old English that we can relate to this missionary period. But they're not these words for reading and writing. So that's yeah, it's a funny one.
One of the clues from that is the German word for Easter, which I hope I remember how to pronounce it. I think it's Ostara, um, if I'm not mistaken. And that is linguistically clearly cognate with Old English, with modern English, Easter. But it's strange that only German and English have this very unique proper noun. What's the word for Easter in Frisian?
It's Beerske in
Oh,
Frisian.
from Pascha.
Pascha, yeah.
From yeah. But the theory was by like the old romantics like Jakob Grimm that perhaps it was a common Germanic god, a goddess, that is, that Aster or maybe Eostre was like
Mm.
this Germanic god, and that Germans and the Anglo-Saxons both worshipped her separately, and both just happened to develop this month name from her, which then became Easter because that's when Easter fell. Um, but recently, I think most scholars discredit this idea and think that it was actually because of the conversion. That when
Mm.
Anglo-Saxons, long after they had dropped their cultivation of what was probably a goddess in England, that is Eostre, they had stopped worshiping her. They kept the month name, and then when they came to Germany, to at least modern geographical Germany, they told everyone like, yeah, you got to start celebrating Easter. It's called Astre, Aster, and I think in your language that would be like Ostara, and there was clearly mutual intelligibility back then, and they probably just picked that up
Yeah.
and ran with it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fun these little bits. I know that there was this very popular like Ostara or something, and I think a lot of yeah, like in sort of modern neo-pagan folk music, that's quite a big thing. But there's so much of this history that, especially this pre-Christian history, that is really lost to us. It's very hard to sort of pick out. And we're currently trying to do a bit of that with the Frisian material as well, because as you say, England is very early already that there's a written culture. Augustinian mission at the end of let me get this right, the end of the 6th century, and then most English kingdoms start to convert or have converted already by the mid 7th. So that's very,
Yeah.
very early. Frisia is still entirely pagan around 100 years later, pretty much, right? So like the
Mm.
conversion in earnest begins with the death of Edbert in around 719, 720, when the Franks conquer the first bit, and the next bit is conquered in 734. Maybe there's questions being asked about that as well because it's all very unclear. And the last bit of Frisia to be incorporated is only incorporated by Charlemagne. So it's a very long span of time, this conquest. And it seems that missionaries that have gone in without the help of this Frankish military support haven't really got very far. Um, so a result of that is that we don't have any written Frisian because there aren't any ecclesiastical houses in Frisia during this period. So the only one we really have is Utrecht, which, fun fact, is called Wiltaburg in the language of the Frisians. Bede tells us. So clearly, Bede had some kind of informant who was aware of the Frisians and their language. But we just don't have any Old Frisian or Proto Old Frisian, I guess, that's written down in this period, apart from a collection of, I think it's about 14 to 16 runic inscriptions, most of which are quite short. Um, so it's a bit of a guessing game when it comes to the period of the start of Frisian and its origins. Um, when we do start to get actual texts, the first couple of glosses are from around 1100, if I'm not mistaken, and then we get a little bit more 1200, and then we get these old Frisian manuscripts, which for the most part are legal documents. So very different to the English material where we get the fun poetry and heroic lays as well as other genres. In Frisian, it's almost all legal stuff, but also very interesting, just in a different way. Even though I would love for there to be a bit more heroic poetry, that would be wonderful. But
Yeah,
alas,
that
we
would
don't
be
quite
sick.
have that.
Yeah, in every ancient language community, everyone feels like they have it the worst. And I'll regularly be spending time with people who are studying Latin, and that's the only language that they are really dedicating time and effort into. And they'll always be complaining about the size of the corpus. And like, oh, I wish that we had more conversational Latin. And my internal response, because I also wish that we had more conversational Latin. I'm also one of these people. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking like, it's so nice that we have conversational Latin. Like, we don't
Honestly.
even have that in Old English. And they'll say things like, "I wish we had more, myths about this. I wish we had someone had told the story. I wish we still had this, myth that we've lost." And I'm practically tearing my hair out over Old English. We have like 6 poems that really are like of the historical, legendary cloth, and we know that there were very many more, even referenced in those poems that we have just totally lost, and it's so frustrating. And of course, we don't have any like sort of conversational text and stuff like that. And then you move on to Frisian, and it's like, well, it would be nice if we had anything like that.
Yeah, and then we're just the very bitter people in the corner at the party, being like, "Oh, if only
Yeah.
those Latin and Old English scholars knew how little we have to work with," wagging our fingers. But no, I
Yeah.
mean, even there's these tantalizing traces of this Frisian past. I mean, there's even been a couple of theories that Beowulf maybe has come in from Frisia to, I think it's Richard North's theory that it was Frisian traders who brought it over. I don't think that's had much traction. But within Beowulf, I mean, there's the sort of saga of Finn and Hengist is there, and I think that clearly shows that these Frisians are very much a part of this North Sea world, together with various peoples from Scandinavia, and also that's been remembered and told or composed about in England. And this really is where these connections between English and Frisian are so interesting, because we can see that. there may have been some similarities between the kinds of North Sea Germanic dialects that were being spoken in England and in Frisia before the movement of peoples from the continent into England. But now a lot of linguists are starting to think that actually a lot of the developments that happened, the kind of Anglo-Frisian developments that mean that we both say cheese and both have a same singular and plural form for sheep and things like that, that actually came after the Anglo-Saxons moved over to England and developed on both sides of the North Sea because of mutual contact. So that's quite
That's
a different
fascinating.
picture that's being put on it. Yeah.
I know that if I'm not mistaken, it was Alfred who employed Frisians in his navy, and scholars will often point to that as really proof that the English and the Frisians could talk to each other because you can't have an entire boat full of sailors who just don't understand the language that I mean, you could, but like if they're working together with other people, it just makes a lot of sense, especially given how similar the languages are. It's probably just more similar that they would actually just talk to each other in their respective dialects rather than that one person would like translate for everyone else. The languages just had to have been too similar for that to like really have been necessary.
Right. I mentioned before the Anglo-Saxon involvement in the missionaries that came over to Frisia,
Hmm.
and this starts sort of in the late 7th century and continues throughout the 8th century. So you have your figures like Wilfrid, Willibrord, Boniface is of course very famous, but also many less well-known figures. And it's often thought that one of the reasons why the Anglo-Saxons played such an important role, despite it being the Franks, the continental Germanic power, who actually conquered the land, it was the Anglo-Saxons who came over and converted the Frisians by and large. And that part of the reason why is because they could communicate with the Frisians because these various dialects or languages were so similar that they were much in a much better position to be able to communicate, as well as, of course, having these really centuries old ties across the North Sea that continue after this period, right? So with Alfred and his navy, we're talking about, I think that's sort of, what is it, the 870s, 880s even,
Yeah,
that he's
late ninth
setting up his
century.
navy. Yeah. So then we're a little bit further in time, but the connections remain at this point.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's very interesting.
It is. You mentioned Beowulf and the theory that Beowulf comes from Frisia, which is hilarious because you really can't find a part of Northern Europe where no scholar has suggested that Beowulf came from that part of the world. I think the most notorious example is the scholar Carl von Mühlenhof from he's from the Dietmarsch in Holstein, and that's like it's a very specific sliver of Holstein. And he argued vehemently that Beowulf was composed in that part of Holstein, and that it just happened to also be where he was from.
That's always the thing, isn't it? It's like there's this theory that sort of stretches the evidence. Oh, and by the way, it happens to be in my backyard, but that's by the by. We won't include that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But the connections to Frisia are more concrete than the connections to the Dietmarsch because Frisia is actually mentioned in Beowulf, which we talked about, we chatted about while we were planning this. But it's such a cool episode because it's the most real part of the entire poem, and it allows us to date the events of the poem because Beowulf's uncle, Higelac, in Old English, that is, dies in a raid in Frisia. And then we are told from separate historical accounts from the Franks that that actually happened. And they call him Clocilacus, I think is what they call him in
Something
Latin,
like that.
which
Yeah.
is pretty similar to how it would sound in Proto-Germanic. Hichelachus. Yeah, I think it would be Hurelaikas. Yeah, Hurelaikar, I think might be the most like period accurate way to that his name might have been pronounced. And if you were a Frankish person hearing that, you were like, okay, Clocilacus is good enough.
Yeah. Close enough. Yeah. Yeah, I
Right.
think it's Gregory of Tours who writes about it. And
Yes, you're correct. Yeah.
interestingly, there's there's all sorts of questions about the emergence of the Frisians in this period. So Beowulf just out and out says, "Oh yeah, this is in the the Frisians were there. They're part of that whole story, that whole saga." Gregory of Tours never mentions Frisians in his account, and there's all sorts of interesting questions about when and where this term Frisian actually comes from.
Interesting.
Because in the Roman period, the Romans were aware of a people called the Frisi, but they describe these people as living in a very particular area that's now largely the county of Holland, and then in parts of what will later become Frisia. So maybe a brief introduction. Essentially, when you think of Frisia, it's from roughly where the Belgian-Dutch border is today, this area of Flanders, and it stretches right the way up the coast to the river Weser, which is now in Germany. And later Frisians also migrated north to the coastal areas and islands off Schleswig-Holstein. So what today is North Frisia, where Frisian is still spoken as well today. Um, and now I've gone on a tangent and I've lost what I was initially going to say. Oh, yes, this term Frisian, where it comes from. So in the Roman period, there are Frisians. Great, they describe them as such. But there's also different people like the Chauci who live in a different part of what becomes Frisia. But we know from archaeology that once the Romans withdrew from this northern border on the Rhine, that there was a habitation hiatus, which is a fancy way of saying that basically most of the people that lived in this border area packed up and left, and it was empty. Various chronologies that we're trying to sort out at the moment, and there's different sort of regional pictures, but on the whole, most people left. And then after, let's say, roughly 100 years, new people came in, re-inhabited the area, and we can tell from the material culture that these are different people from the people that had gone before. They have different pots, they plan their settlements in different ways. There's different kind of jewelry that we find. It seems they've come from kind of the area of northern Germany and a second wave maybe from southern Denmark. Anyway, long story short, these people are later, when the Franks push back up north, are also called Frisians. But wait a minute, they aren't the same as the people that were there in the Roman period. So why are they called Frisians? It's like there's been a disappearing act that happened, and then they've kind of stolen the identity of the previous people. So there's all sorts of ideas about how we explain that. But we do wonder then if Gregory of Tours, in his account, which is I think is that what is that fifth or sixth century that he's writing,
Yeah.
he doesn't yet use the term Frisian for the people that he finds there, but the poet of Beowulf does use the term Frisian. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's something
And the
there.
poet of Widsith. I mean, the Frisians were important clearly in the Germanic mythology. Cadmon's hymn is the oldest poem that we can date. Widsith might be older. In fact, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that parts of the poem are very, very old, and have been passed down, through generations in this sort of poetic tradition. Widsith, of course, being basically just a list of names of important people in the Germanic legendarium. And of course, the line for the Frisians is Finn Folkwalding Fresna Kynne. Finn Folkwalding, the king of the kin of the Frisians, because there's an implied wailed there. Finn Folkwalding wailed Fresna Kynne. He was in charge of the kin of the Frisians. Um, and that again that poetic material might be as old as the seventh, sixth century,
Right.
Um, and part of the evidence, if you're curious, is they refer to there's a lot of evidence. The one that sticks out most to me is that they refer to the cities of the Romans as the Weinbergs, which is really interesting because the association with wine as being produced by the Romans um, is very old and doesn't happen anymore by the Old English period. They've stopped associating wine with being like a sort of thing that the Romans make in like their Roman like wine factory cities or something like
Yeah.
that. That's clearly a figment of the early Germanic imagination, not the Christian English imagination. So that and many other things, really, really interesting to think about. Also, the fact that they call the Romans the Walos when that
Yeah.
term became Welsh in
Right.
English. So lots of really interesting archaicisms. But again, so they refer to the Frisians, Finn Folkvalding, Fresa
Yeah,
Kine. Finn, of course, also being mentioned in the Finnsburg fragment and in Beowulf. He seemed like an
yeah.
important figure.
And in some later genealogies, right? We're not sure if this is the same Finn because we don't get that epithet of Folkwalding. But in some later Anglo-Saxon genealogies, these kings are also tracing their lineage back to this mythical ancestor character called Finn. And well, there is a Finn in sort of Scandinavian mythology who seems to be some kind of giant, if I'm not mistaken. But again, possibly. I know there's Yeat is found in some of these old genealogies as well, who of course shares a name with the people of Beowulf. So there's this whole web that's there, and I think it would be great to sort of sit down and I don't know, get a big lump sum of PhD funding and try and figure some of this stuff out at some point. But so if there's any wealthy investors listening who want to get to the bottom of this, you know who to get in touch with. Let's say that.
Well, you know who else shares a genealogy with Finn, um, is the House of Finwë in the Silmarillion.
Ah,
Tolkien's Noldor elves. He in Old English he names Finwë Finn, and I mean, there's obviously no way to tell. I think that he originally had intended on sort of connecting that somehow with the Frisians and with the fragment, which was of course very important to him. He wrote a lot about it. He did a lot of scholarship on it. But Finwë, you'll notice a lot of the elves in that genealogy have a name beginning with Finn, like Fingolfin and Fingor, and like that's very Old English, and it's the House
yeah.
of Finn. But of course, in Elvish, his name is Finwë, so not exactly the same.
I had never made that connection, but now you say it, I can completely see it. Because yeah, as you say, he wrote this book, right, Finn and Hengist, about this. He
Mhm.
spent a lot of time lecturing on this subject, and I think, and I emailed Tom Shippey about it, who of course is well, probably the biggest Tolkien scholar alive today. Um, about whether this scene in The Lord of the Rings, where they approach the hall and there's this strife, whether that has some kind of echoes of the Finnsburg fragment as well, where it starts with a lone lady who's sorrowful at the death of kin, but that it's in a way it's a happy version of the Finnsburg saga because things do go well in that case. I don't know, maybe there's something there.
Yeah, I think the if you're referring to when Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli arrive at Meduseld. I think that that's probably mostly a reference to when Beowulf and his companions arrive at Heorot, because there's so
Mm,
many parallelisms of, they're asked to leave their weapons at the door. It's a sort of they have the border guard first is the one that first meets them, and that's kind of represents Éomer, and they even exchange platitudes where Éomer says some like wisdom, and Aragorn gives some like wisdom, and so it's that same thing happens between Beowulf and the border guard, and then they get to actually the gate and they're met by Hrothgar's Thane, and the same thing is true with Theoden's. Thane meets them at the door, and then they come in, and the hero is immediately challenged by the advisor. By Beowulf is challenged by Unferth, and Gandalf and Aragorn are challenged by, of course,
it's called Grima.
yeah, Wormtongue, Grima
Yeah.
Wormtongue. Well, I want to talk a bit about the state of the modern Frisian language. So you have a couple videos on your channel, on your Frisian channel specifically, talking about this, and I thought it was really interesting. I had never heard of, the attempts to preserve it and conserve it before watching your videos. Could you speak a bit to the state of modern Frisian?
Yeah, for sure. So, Frisian, normally what we mean by Frisian, and I guess as we've used it in this video, is the variety that's spoken in the north of the Netherlands. So, linguistically, this is called West Frisian. And as that name implies, there are also other Frisians. The three main dialect groupings of the Frisian languages, really, the three branches of the Frisian language family, are West, East, and North. So West Frisian is spoken in the north of the Netherlands. It's the variety that I spoke in this video and that I learned. And that's spoken by around 500,000 people. Official figures are lower than that. It's around 450,000. but there was a boom of emigration out of Frisia in the 1950s, largely 40s, 50s. So there's a lot of people around the world that also have this as a heritage language. Hard to put an estimate on that figure. That's by far and away the largest branch. Then we also have the smallest branch, which is the sole surviving member of the East Frisian language family, which is spoken in Germany in an area called the Saalterlund. Um, it's spoken by around 2,000 people, so a lot smaller. And it survived, whereas the rest of this area used to be Frisian speaking, right the way from sort of the Belgian border, right the way to the River Weser in Germany. Um, that a large part of that area switched to speaking Low German around some point in the 1500s, 1600s. That completely switched over. But the reason it survived in this small area is because it was quite isolated. It was surrounded by marshland, and the people there during the Reformation remained Catholic. So they had kind of an incentive to kind of look inwards and not to look outwards and to take over the new language that other people were adopting. And so it survived and it still survives today. And then finally, the third branch we have are the North Frisian languages, which are spoken on the coast and the islands of Schleswig-Holstein. There are many different variants of this language that oftentimes aren't mutually intelligible with each other, let alone with East Frisian or West Frisian. So none of these are actually mutually intelligible with each other. So that's why we should probably speak of Frisian as a language family rather than as a language itself, which is often how we do refer to it as just Frisian. Basically, all three of these language situations are very different, and they all face different challenges to this day. It may seem like East Frisian is the most under threat because it has the fewest number of speakers, but actually these numbers have been relatively stable throughout time, and it is protected by law as well. I think the one that's most under threat really is North Frisian, where there are around 10,000 speakers in total, but because it's divided into something like 10 or 12 dialects or sub varieties, it means that having a kind of cohesive speaker body is quite difficult. So I think, yeah, some of these language varieties will probably go extinct in the next couple of decades, unfortunately. But there are a few among them. So on the islands of Fering and Sølring, these are larger varieties. So these are a bit better protected. In terms of West Frisian, as I said, about 500,000 people speak this language, all told, of which around upwards of, I think, 20% are second language speakers. So there's quite a large body of people that have learned Frisian as a second language in the province of Friesland, where around 95% of people can understand Frisian, with around 75% able to speak it. So that's actually a very healthy situation to be in when it comes to minority languages. So Frisian is quite well established. I think the biggest challenge that West Frisian faces is that it's still sort of socially a lot of the time, even if legally it has protection, it's socially seen as being less worthy as than Dutch, um, and that most Frisians can't write Frisian. They can't spell Frisian, and that sort of means that they don't read much Frisian. So it's not a very literary language, even though there are people that write it and authors and poetry. That's something that we're trying to change at the moment. Yeah.
Right. And you've spoken about how the literary aspect is so important for the sort of emotional or sort of, what word am I looking for? The internal respect that people have for a language, maybe subconsciously, if it's not a literary language, if they don't know how to read or write in it, then it's kind of seen as rustic,
Mm.
and that, hurts its ability to survive. Do you, where is the kind of criticism of Frisian coming from generation wise? Is it generally older people who consider it to be like not conducive to success, or is it younger people who think it's too confusing and difficult? What's the kind of the character of the resistance?
That's a really good question. I think it depends a little bit. I think it's very easy because for my own background, I didn't grow up speaking Frisian. I grew up in England. I had two parents who spoke Dutch, so I spoke Dutch in the house, and I spoke English and a bit of Geordie outside the house. And then later in life, I learned Frisian because my dad spoke Frisian. So it was a heritage language for us, and I think that makes it quite easy. I now live in Friesland, and I'm working and actively involved in trying to preserve Frisian. It makes it very easy as an outsider to sort of start to point out and go, "Oh, I think this is the problem and that's the problem." But whether it's accurate or not, I think it is that for such a long time, Frisian had a lower status to Dutch. That is something that has just been sort of baked in generation after generation. That even if people say that they're quite pro-Frisian, the way that they act might not be. And it's this idea, indeed, that uh, Frisian is fine as a language at home, as a spoken language, but oh, you probably shouldn't write. You probably shouldn't write it. You probably shouldn't use it in official settings. We recently had that they started to put some of the place names in Frisian on you know, like on signs on the roadside, and these debates about whether we should have signage. And there's a lot of protest from Frisian speakers about this as well, which is quite interesting because these are people who will say these, they're happy to say these names in Frisian, but not to have them written down. And then you wonder, oh, where does that come from? And I think that's probably because for such a long time, Frisian wasn't a written language, that there is still this implicit idea of Dutch is higher in the hierarchy than Frisian is. And I think a good example is that recently the regional parliament did decide to have Frisian on road signs, but they said Dutch will go on top and Frisian will go below. And that's very much how it is. Yeah.
Interesting. I know in a lot of efforts of language conservation, one thing that's becoming popular nowadays is for politicians, especially younger politicians, to begin using their language in actual official settings. So I know that in Irish, in Ireland, a lot of Irish politicians have begun actually speaking the language in their official like duties and responsibilities, which is controversial because some Irish people actually literally just cannot understand it at all. But you know
I think most.
it's a big
Yeah.
statement. And you know the same thing I think is happening in Wales. I've seen it in Cornish even. I think the one of the Cornish PMs recently gave an address in Cornish, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
Do you see anything like that happening in Frisian?
Well, this is the strange thing that there is a regional parliament, and there things happen in Frisian all the time. That's very normal.
Hmm.
So that it does have that level of tolerance for Frisian. But in the national parliament, there was someone there, Ant Supur, who gave his maiden speech in Frisian. So that was pretty, ooh,
Hmm.
that was quite shocking. That was pretty unprecedented. The I think the difference with Frisia, or with Friesland, I should say, the province, is that, as I said, 94% of the inhabitants can understand Frisian. In Ireland, people who are fluent in Irish is a much smaller
Yeah.
number than this in Frisia. But there is, I think, in Ireland, there is, even if for the vast majority of people, it's not a language that they use on a daily basis or are conversational in. There's a lot more respect for the language. It's seen as being an essential part of heritage, and most people are actively for having more Irish on street signs, using it more in education. The kind of, oh, I wish we had more of it. Whereas in Friesland, it seems to be the opposite situation, where it's used a lot more. It's the active, I mean, it's the majority of people living here have it as a first language and use it every day. But a lot of people aren't interested in seeing its scope widened in more official settings.
Would you say that it's almost because they don't understand the sort of imminence of the threat of extinction or the threat of the language fading away because they see it so often in their regular day-to-day lives?
I mean, possibly, but I think I mean, pretty much all Frisian speakers are bilingual with Dutch anyway. So there's, a lot of families will have, well, my family is an example. I speak Frisian with my dad and Dutch with my mother. So there's, right, it's a very mixed environment anyway, which I think is great. I think that's what we need in many ways, and that won't change. I think the trouble is that in general, Dutch people are very practical. Um, and I think sometimes that goes to an extreme. Whereas they say, oh yeah, well, Dutch will help us more in the long run, but then obviously that will go at a cost of the Frisian language, which needs support because of this, well, historical oppression of the Frisian language, people who spoke Frisian in courts and education, etc. But also modern pressures. Obviously, if you can't read Frisian, we do a lot of reading every day. We do a lot of watching Netflix, listening to the radio or the TV. If that's all in another language, that's going to impact the way that you feel about these languages. And there are radio stations, TV channels, authors, podcasts that are in Frisian as well. So that's definitely up and coming, and that's something we'd definitely like to see more of. But currently, that is the kind of situation that I think influences how people feel about Frisian and why we get this pushback of, oh no, we shouldn't have Frisian on these signs. Because if you've hardly seen any written Frisian, then yeah, you might think, well, what is this? Is this a waste of money? Why would we do this? Etc.
Yeah, the efficiency argument is, I think, really perplexing to me. And honestly, even a bit vexing. People will say things like, honestly, I've heard people really suggest, guess which country they're from, that everyone should just really move to English for all business transactions, for all entertainment, in order to sort of unite the Western world in one language that makes, makes it available able to money will flow faster, things will go easier, people can travel between countries and not have to worry about language barriers. This might be a difficult question, but how would you argue against something like that? Like really, obviously, I think everyone knows in their heart that that's a ridiculous idea and that, we should never do that. But why?
Hmm. Well, I think in the case of Frisian, it's something where you can make that monetary argument and say, oh yeah, it would make more sense if we all switched to English, if we all, d did everything this way, because then we can just have this open trade. Well, in the Netherlands, I mean, I think we're the best country in the world who don't have English as a first language for proficiency in English. It's very, very high. However, I mean, we don't just do things to earn money, right? If we did that, we would never buy any nice food. We wouldn't wear anything but the simplest, cheapest clothes. We'd live in tiny boxes instead of houses. There are other things in life that are important apart from this, like just the practical aspects. And I think the nice thing about Frisian is that, and I hear this all the time from people, you get a different reaction if you speak to someone in their mother tongue than into something that isn't. It sort of hits people on a different level. And with Frisian, it's an encoding of a way of seeing the world that has survived through all these years. I mean, there hasn't been an independent Frisian state since the 1400s, but this language has survived all this time. And there's some beautiful things in Frisian. So, a word for horizon is erein, which is the word er, which is I. So I think that's probably quite similar to the Old English word for I, still
Mhm.
there. And then ein, which is the end. So the Erein is the end of what the eye sees. And that's like a little bit of poetry in one word. And I think if we all switch to speaking Dutch or to English, we would lose these little methods of seeing the world, these little idiosyncrasies that create this sense of community, which is very strong in Friesland. And I think language is ultimately a part of that communal feeling. And so I'm a big fan of regional identity. I'm a big fan of welcoming people who want to be part of that identity in as well. I think it goes both ways. But I think at the end of the day, if we were to lose that, we would just lose one of those very colorful, flavorful bits of history and of the present.
Well said. Hilbert, thanks for coming on the channel.
Thanks so much for having me. As we say in Friesland, Oortje.